So we're now streaming on Facebook, and this is the Majoring in Men Intensive. And excited to have Pastor David Bendett from Rock City Church in Corpus Christi, a great friend, David and Amber. And David just got in. They're restoring an old farmhouse they just got.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of only 38 projects you have, David, Pastor
That's
David.
right.
Yeah. So let me mention a couple of things. I want to get right into it. So thank you for being with us. This is the Majoring in Men Foundations Intensive. Majoringinmen.com is a 12-part, 20 minutes each section of how to disciple men and how to do it in the context and the matrix of a local church, because that's where we're at. And that's why great friends like Pastor David and others are involved with us on a regular basis, because we're about building men, building families, and building churches. And so it's great to have everyone who's with us right now and watching this after we do this. And David, there's a couple things, and I just want to hit right on the front end and just get right into it. And that is, you have really begun to concentrate on discipling men, and you've got a lot going on. You own restaurants, cafes, the best coffee in Texas, right?
Absolutely. In probably the world, really.
Probably the world. Waves Coffee. Yeah. And so you've got that. Your church is just a few years old, and yet you've bought part of an entire shopping center. Of course, you and your wife, Amber, are redoing this little farmhouse you guys the Lord just blessed you with. And I mean, one thing after another, you've got all this stuff. And yet in all of this, it seems like as I watch you and you and I talk, you center on over and over, you come back to discipling men. Why is that such a key for you?
Well, I was abandoned as a child. I was orphaned. And I understand the concept that everybody's an orphan until they get born again.
Wow. And
so rescuing orphans is what fathers do. And I understand this mindset that when you don't know the Lord, you see him, and even a lot of Christians, not even if you don't know him, there's a lot of Christians living with a master-slave mentality with God.
Wow.
Versus a father-son mentality.
Yeah.
And so many men are living in condemnation and feeling like they're failures and that they aren't good enough or they're not measuring up. And they're carrying all this weight and pressure with being the provider and, working. Most men are workaholics. Most men really are living like orphans. That's why.
Mm-hmm. But
I was rescued. And once I was rescued and became a son, it put me on a mission to do the same for other men.
Wow. That's powerful. And Master Slave. And so everybody's watching right now, I want you to know that we're going to get in. This is not obviously just the way that Pastor David started, vulnerable, honest. And so we're going to get into some things for about 30 minutes, but you need something to write this stuff down with. I already started taking notes, because the next time I speak and share this stuff, I'm going to look like a genius. But here's the key. You have centered in on that because of the heart of a father. Paul said this. He said to the church at Corinth, he said, you have 10,000 instructors, but not many fathers. And you and I know, we've talked about it a number of times. Paul was drawing a contrast between master slave. It's a great comment. Instructor student and father son. He said, I'm not just an instructor. I love you like a father. An instructor, and here's the way we've always put it in Christian Men's Network, an instructor gives you what he knows, but a father gives you who he is. And so what you've seen is it begins to actually change the culture of your church when you disciple men.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you have a church full of strong men, then you have strong dynamic leaders that are being point men. And we have to understand that, Jesus is a lot of different things,
mm-hmm.
right? He's actually called a father. He's a son. He's the Prince of Peace. He's a gardener.
Yeah.
But he's also a general.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people don't know Jesus, the general. And we have to understand that we're enlisted into an army.
Yeah.
And if we're entangled and caught up in the cares and the affairs of the world, then we're not able to please the one who enlisted us. And the reason why is because we're so consumed with the affairs of our own life instead of being consumed with his affairs.
Wow.
And so, when men are consumed with godly affairs, can you imagine what can happen? How a culture can be shifted, cities can be shifted, nations can be shifted.
Wow.
Because the men rise up in the context of a militant mindset.
Wow.
And, when I say militant, for a lot of people, that can trigger something.
Yeah.
Right. Militant doesn't mean that, he's a tyrant or that he rules with a strong fist. He can, but what it really means is that he is aggressive for family.
Yeah.
Aggressive to rescue.
I love that, because too often what happens is when we start talking strong men and you start talking, for instance, Joel 3:9 is something we've talked about a lot, which is wake up the mighty men, get ready for battle. And if we're not careful, we start thinking about it in a jingoistic sort of thing that, if you're going to be part of this men's movement, you got to go kill your own meat, or something. And I've said it over and over, Pastor David, and you're a warrior, but you have the heart of an artist. You're an artisan when it comes to your coffee. You're an artist when it comes to, you're a musician. All of these things. So I look at, if you wrote a movie, if you did a script for a great movie, that's as much warfare as the guy who goes out and travels somewhere and preaches a sermon. Right? So God's calling all men into this fight.
That's right. And, obviously one of the greatest weapons of warfare is how we choose to live our lives in discipline. And, obviously as disciples, we have a responsibility to make sure that we don't have a house with kicked down doors and blown out windows, or a city with broken down walls.
Wow.
So discipline is this understanding that we are on a mission with a purpose for a reason. And the world is also doing the same thing, and they're extremely aggressive. We don't need nice fathers. We need aggressive pastors and aggressive fathers that are on a mission to fight and rescue. Children are dying. There's a war being waged by the enemy like never before. We already have the victory, but we have to seal the deal. Jesus sealed the deal on the cross, but we seal the deal by pulling people out of darkness. We storm the gates of hell.
Come on, man.
And men are designed by God. In Ephesians 5, it makes it clear that we are the head of the family. What does that really mean? Most people don't understand what that means. And that doesn't mean that we subject people under us.
Yeah, it's not like a dictatorship.
That's right. But what it does mean is that, we sanctify, we cleanse with first our wives. Everything starts first at home. If you can't take care of your own house, how can you expect to take care of God's house?
Yeah.
Everybody's a pastor at home. Everybody's a shepherd at home. Even if you're single, you are designed to be a pastor, even to yourself and to those in your immediate sphere of influence. And so when we lead confidently, when we step out confidently, the words we say, we literally sanctify and bring life to people. We wash them, we cleanse them to present people to God without spot or wrinkle, starting with our wives, to Jesus, a glorious church. It's a glorious church mindset.
So when you talk about discipling men, you're really talking about, you're not just saying, hey, they need to show up at certain meetings. It's really about developing the character of Christ on the inside so that their serving comes from a heart of grace, not from a religious sort of, I've got to do this thing. This is,
Well, of course, we have a saying at Rock City Church, you aren't what you do what you are. You aren't what you do what you are. Most people get their value based on what they do instead of who they are. Most people get their self-esteem needs met by their ministry positions or titles.
Wow.
Or how they serve or how they give. And I'm not negating serving and giving or even titles. But we put the cart before the horse. If you don't know who you are and your identity, most men find their value in their identity by what they do or the job. The world defines a good man. Even a lot of Christians define a good man by how much they provide for their family. He's a
Wow.
good man. He works hard. He works 70 hours a week. That is a good man. That's not according to God's standards. So you miss your kids' birthdays and you're not there to tuck your kids in and you leave early. Psalm 127 is the pattern for today's time. Unless the Lord builds your house, you're wasting your time. I'll paraphrase it. Unless the Lord builds a house, the laborers labor in vain. But then he goes on to say, it's vain for you to rise up early and go to bed late and eat your bread with sorrows. Your children are actually an inheritance from me. And then he goes on to talk about warfare. Children are arrows, polished arrows in the hand of a warrior. Who's the warrior? You and me, men, even women too. But the real understanding is that God positions us at the city gates to do it without shame. And our children and our families literally become ammunition to drive back demonic forces. It's all comes down. The kingdom was designed for the children and legacy of the generations behind us.
Wow. Because as we always say, legacy is not legacy. What you do in life becomes history, but what you put into motion becomes your legacy.
I love that.
So most men, it's like a friend of mine said once, he said, you know, we set up churches as seeker churches. The problem is most men are not seeking, they're running. Most men today are runners. But what they're running after is probably the issue. It's my son Brandon the other day paraphrased something a lot of people have said. He said, you know, most men are trying to get to the top of the ladder, but when they get there, they realize that ladder was against the wrong building. And so when we disciple men in a practical way at Rock City, it's on purpose. It's not just sort of, okay, men are going to be okay because they show up on Sunday morning.
That's right. And we have to break this mindset in men that their sole purpose in life is to work and provide for their family. God has a bigger purpose. Any job that we have is designed to be a tent making job, period. It doesn't mean that we don't have politicians and doctors and lawyers and any job that you can think of, from scrubbing toilets to picking up, I don't care what it is. At the end of the day, God's prime purpose and design for all men is the garden of delight and pleasure. So if a man's not walking in delight and pleasure with the Lord in his heart and walking in his purpose that God has designed for him and expressing the gift inside of him, he will look to find pleasure and delight somewhere else. That's usually pornography, infidelity, or money, or entertainment. Let me just say it's about those four things.
Yeah. The pride of life, lust of the eye, lust of the flesh. Yeah.
Right. And so if we're going to talk about discipling men, the first thing that we have to do is we have to shift their thinking. You're not going to disciple men just by having better, bigger meetings and more church services and even more curriculum. We do all those things. But we know, and any man that's watching has to understand that there has to be a transformation on the inside, but then a shifting. You know, when Jesus showed up on the scene in Mark chapter 1, what's said in John, fishing by the sea? He said, repent, for the kingdom of God the time is now, and the kingdom of God is at hand. It was literally a prophetic word. Hey, I'm here now in your face. Change the way that you think and change the way that you live. And the word was so full of power that they literally would drop their nets and leave everything behind.
Yeah. Paul said in Romans 12:2, he said, if you want to change the trajectory of your life, you have to change the way you think.
Exactly. And we talk about being fishers of men. Most people think, oh, well, that means I got to go be an evangelist. That's not what that means. What God's saying is, I have a better career for you.
Wow.
And when you put my kingdom first, when you build my kingdom, I'll make sure you never lack. Take it from me. I was in prison. I lived on the streets. I've been through 2 hurricanes. I've been married before. I'm like a poster child of suffering. I've lost a child. But this isn't playtime. This is go time. And if any man's watching, I want you to be inspired to understand God has so much bigger and so much more for you. To be a fisher of men is this understanding that God has a better career, and he'll use your financial business or work as a better means to an end, meaning that it's for a purpose for him. And hence, expansion is inevitable. Expansion is inevitable in God's kingdom. The thing is, you have to hit this thing with men, because men are consumed with those four things: career, money, pleasure, delight, entertainment, feeling, and the world defines it. We've groomed the baby boomer generation, groomed I'm Generation X. Yeah. Groomed my generation for career. Everything was about going to college and getting a degree to make a good job to provide for my family. Few was about doing God's will, being spirit-led, doing his purpose and plan on earth as it is in heaven.
Or even character.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And now that's why we are where we're at, because we became addicted to comfort over character.
That's it. And most people want to be comfortable. That's why you see such a lack of supernatural activity in so many people's lives or churches, because it forces you to be aggressive.
Yeah, you guys have you have a saying at Rock City that I love about the supernatural.
Well, it's Jesus himself said, because you're neither hot or cold, because you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out. Your better option is, he wants you hot or hot. Here's your choice, hot or hot. Cold's not even a good option.
Yeah, I put before you death and life. But you're saying around Rock City that I love is super normal natural.
Supernatural should be normal. Men are dumbed down and dulled down.
Wow.
Where's the power of God in a normal way?
Come on, man.
Because most men have been taught it's abnormal, and we have churches filled with women who are hungry for the supernatural. And, God designed the bride of Christ. I mean, he calls us as men even a bride. We're defined from a feminine terminology that he calls us a bride. But at the end of the day, we are called to be men that rise up in the bride of Christ and demonstrate the supernatural power of God. And I think if men were experiencing the supernatural power of God, they would be more flamed on.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Now, the thing is that when you talk about faithfulness, the faithful steward, the one thing that when Jesus told those stories about faithful stewards, faithfulness always was coupled with multiplication. In other words, faithfulness always developed increase. Faithfulness never was, and sometimes I think faithfulness, talk about dumbing it down, we've made it so risk averse that faithfulness becomes just showing up. And faithfulness, just showing up, was the guy who buried his talent, right?
That's right.
But faithfulness in terms of going after it is like Jason. They said about those guys, man, these guys came to turn the world upside down. But you're not going to turn the world upside down by just kind of coasting along. So faithfulness means actually going after the mission of Jesus Christ, to seek and save that which was lost.
It's this understanding of reproduction.
Bam, bride of Christ.
We're designed to reproduce, right? We're designed to reproduce. And if we're not reproducing sons and daughters and family and advancing the kingdom, we're reproducing something else. Wow. And that's why let's go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 4 again. I mean, we both love it so much. But Paul said, I'm not saying this to shame you. I'm saying this to warn you. Think about what it means to warn. It means I'm literally in this constant tension between dark and light, and steering and pulling people towards the purposes and promises and warning them of the pitfalls of going another way. And then he says, of course, you have a lot of instructors, but not many fathers. But then he says one more thing that's so critical. He says, therefore, imitate me.
Yeah.
11:1 says the same thing. Imitate me as I imitate Christ. And the challenge here is that we need fathers that can be imitated. We need fathers that set the example. And I'm just going to boldly say that we've got a lot of great information, but not a lot of revelation. We've got a lot of great teaching, but not a lot of supernatural power.
Come
And
on.
1 Corinthians 2 makes it explicitly clear. Paul's like, I didn't come to you with excellency of speech,
Right.
but rather with a demonstration of the power of God. Then
Yeah.
this is big for me. And it doesn't mean we don't need great teaching and great information, but people need an awakening. They need a lightning strike from God, especially men. You and I know the war on masculinity today.
Oh,
and fatherhood.
Yeah. And the thing is that too often what we get committed to, we get totally taken by the flash and dash, by the strut and hoop, and the guys who can do that, and that becomes a big thing. But what it's really about is about the anointing of God, the reproduction and power of the Holy Spirit to reproduce new followers of Christ who are disciples. That's what Jesus told us to disciple. Hey, let me mention a couple things. You talked about No More Christian Nice Guy. Right now on our podcast this week, we just dropped a podcast with Paul Coughlin, who wrote No More Christian Nice Guy.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So our podcast, which is called Brave Men, and you can find out on iTunes, as our producer, Chris Shields, says, anywhere the finer podcasts are, we're there.
Yeah.
But it's a great podcast, very inspirational. Guys can listen to that on the way to work, listen to that while you're working out, working on the lawn, or like you're doing with your rebuilding a farmhouse while you're on your tractor out there, David.
Or feeding the donkeys and the chickens and the goats.
Donkeys and the chickens, yeah. So the podcast is called Brave Men. And then let me mention again, because you're watching this on the Christian Men's Network Facebook, the majoringinmen.com, majoringinmen.com. The things that Pastor David's talking about are on there. That's a 12-part teaching series that was $100, and then because of Rock City Church and other churches and partners across the nation, that website now is absolutely free. You can go there and your fee has been paid for, and go there, sign in, get your code and whatever. You'll also get a discount on materials and products, but majoringinmen.com. I want to mention one other thing, and that is our CMN Summit is coming up. If you're watching this before November 5, 6, and 7, here in Dallas, the cmnsummit.com, cmnsummit.com. And Pastor David's one of the great teachers and inspiring guys who will be there, always is. And Javon Ruff, many others, you can see it on that website. We'll have in person and online. So the online is very robust. It's going to be fantastic. And I think you guys are actually having a number of men come in and watch that, right?
Yeah, we're actually gonna live stream it and have a conference. We're wrapping a conference around it. We're gonna rope in on some of the sessions, some of our own guys giving testimonies, and we're opening it up to our entire city and opening up the sanctuary. So we're going to be having the same conference live streamed at our church, providing lunch and different events. Every year when we come to the Lion's Roar, we do a late night prophetic blowout at the hotel. We grab all of our guys and anybody else that wants to come, and we order in pizza, and then we lay hands on each other and pray over each other. And it's turned out to be really a big highlight for every year that we come. And so we're going to be doing that this year. I am actually going to be with you. So I'm excited about that. But I also just want to say to everybody that's watching, what I love so much about Paul and Christian Men's Network is it's hard to find what I would consider a world-class men's curriculum that is easy to understand, that really challenges men on biblical manhood, what it means to be a husband, a father, a son. And many, many years ago, when I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma at Open Bible Fellowship, I read in a Purity with Purpose class, Maximize Manhood. And this is a book that Paul's dad wrote, who has since passed away, but it is a multi-million copy bestseller all over the world.
Yeah.
And it's a book that has radically changed my life. And this is why we do this curriculum. This is really when I knew that I had the opportunity to meet you many, many years ago. After reading your dad's book, I said, I need to be connected with this guy. And our church, it's big for us to not do our own curriculum, but why reinvent the wheel when I got somebody like you and such incredible ministry and curriculum like you have?
This never quit. We started a Monday night men. We had to pivot because of not having events and stuff. So we started a Monday night men, and it's on YouTube. So you can go on YouTube, type in Monday night men, and there's his teaching. Well, as a church, Sam Masteller, I don't think you've met Pastor Sam yet, Freedom Life Church in Christiana. They took that Monday night men, they actually take the video, and they started it a few weeks ago, and they show it on Monday night at their church as their men's gathering. Well, they started 3 weeks ago. They had 68, 70 guys show up. 3 weeks later, they're now having close to 100 men show up. And so they have testimony. Then they show me teaching for 28 minutes. Pastor Sam closes it. They break into small groups, pray with each other. Pretty remarkable stuff going on in churches across the country because pastors like yourself have seen the need to disciple men. Now, you mentioned something coming out of your background. You mentioned being orphaned. You mentioned the things. So you didn't come out of, in other words, what you're doing right now didn't come out of some sort of, white picket fence, sort of yellow flower sort of thing, and went to Bible college and became this. It came out of some stuff that was difficult.
Yeah, my dad got my 24-year-old Greek mom pregnant. They were dating, they weren't married, and he wasn't ready to have a child. And so he was on the top of his career, managing a lot of big name bands all over the world, and wound up hightailing it to Beverly Hills, California, and left my young Greek mom and I in Miami. And so I was raised by a single mom where she worked 2 jobs, and I was at a babysitter that I hated all day, every day as a child. And then when I was about 6 years old, a stepfather came into my life that kind of rescued me and brought what I would consider the spirit of adoption into my life, Romans 8:15, 16. And but did not really teach me the ways of the Lord. He had real church hurt issues, but he did raise me and showed me what it meant to rescue, but was missing something really big, which was really the Lord, although the Lord used him. And so I was very orphaned. And when you're an orphan, you really do all you can to protect and preserve yourself. You deal with real neglect and abandonment inside of your heart. You feel powerless to change things. So you work to earn and measure up and perform. So this whole measure up performance thing is really big for me. And this mindset that I have to please God by performing and measuring up for him.
Wow.
And not understanding who he is as a loving father and the way that a father really sees a son. And so I was orphaned. And in turn, that led me to a lifestyle of being very promiscuous. I did a lot of things that I share in my testimony, sold drugs, slept around, parties, clubs, bars, 45 Grateful Dead concerts. I was searching for love in all the wrong places. It was peace, love, and happiness thrown out of this straight from the 60s. And I loved it and I loved the community, but it left me empty. And so I was a full-scale orphan. And the challenge is when I came to the Lord, I came to the Lord not because I recognized I was such a sinner. I came to the Lord because I needed a father.
Wow.
The Lord became the dad that I never had. And so, but even then, when I first came to the Lord, I still carried this measure up performance, please God. I was born again in the early 90s, and there was still a lot of residue from the 80s. So it was a lot of, if you do this, God will do this. If you perform and you measure up and you do your devotions, God will be pleased with you. But if you don't do those things, and it was a lot of, sin separates you from God. And so it's more that God pulled away from you rather than you pulled away from God. And therefore I have to earn it back.
Wow.
And so it was a lot of performance measure up mentality. And I'm passionate about this with men because most men are living in that today. Most men feel like they have to perform and measure up. And if I do the right things, then God's pleased with me and he'll bless me. But if I don't, then he won't.
Because we come out of a culture that has an orphan spirit in it.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And again, everybody's an orphan until they're born again. But there are Christian orphans too.
Mm-hmm.
I think the American westernized church system is filled with Christian orphans. They don't a key indicator of an orphan is I'm powerless to affect change.
Mm.
And most people getting their passport stamped to make it to heaven and going through the Christian motions and hoping that they barely make it along. And I say this a lot. I say, the difference between a believer and a disciple? A believer will make it to heaven. A disciple brings heaven to earth.
Come on, man. That's why Jesus came.
Bingo.
He didn't come just to get us out of here. He came to bring heaven here.
That's right.
Yeah. Shoot, this is such good stuff, Pastor David. But you've seen, let me come back to this men's thing and this testimony. Hey, is your testimony on a podcast or is it on your website? What's your website for the church?
It's rockcitycorpus.com. And we also have a podcast, Rock City Corpus, but you can go to our podcast.
Okay.
And you'll have to scroll back a while because it's been a minute since I've done it, but it is on our podcast. And you can also access the podcast from our website as well.
Okay. rockcitycorpus.com, CORPUS, and one of the guys will put it on Facebook, and rockcitycorpus.com, because that testimony, have you put it in a book yet?
I am in the process of writing the book. Yes, the book is being written. I just turned 50, so it's about time I get my midlife auto written.
I'll tell you what, though, that I'd love to see it in a format. I remember Full Gospel Businessmen International years ago had these smaller, they weren't small like tracts. There were books, but they were smaller books in the sense that you could buy 3 of them for $10 or something and hand them out. I just encourage that because not only is your story compelling, but it parallels where so many of us live right now. Generation X, how you got parented or non-parented, somebody was in your life, got a good guy came in, all the different conflicts, the tension, the whole thing, man. And then where you are today, you're a business owner, you're a serial entrepreneur. You guys have 3 cafes, maybe doing a 4th. All kinds of stuff going on. You've got the church, and the church is growing. And I would say Rock City, here's the beauty of it. Darlene Check said this in one of our meetings in Peru about 5 years ago. She was there, she and her husband, Mark, and they were shooting some commercials for Compassion. And Robert Berger, and we asked Darlene if she'd do an opening comment to this men's conference, which was fascinating. But she's, great songwriter, incredible woman of God. She got up and she said this: when men, and we just got done singing, it was great worship time of music for all the men and a time of prayer. She got up and said, when men worship, women feel safe. Mm-hmm. And that is the sense. So when we talk about, because Rock City, when I go there, I feel a sense of a masculine church. But if you will, what that does is it helps women come alive. It's a place of safety, strength, covering, love, affection. Jesus didn't come to, he came to serve. In that sense. So it's the servant heart that men get when they really know Christ that I really see evident at Rock City. And I know that comes from you and Amber, your wife, and family. You're a father with little children. You've got growing up, you've got chickens and goats and whatever.
I take care of animals at home and I take care of animals at church.
Come on, somebody. But I'll tell you what, that commitment to discipling men shows up in the temperature, the texture, and the feel of the church. And it's attractive. And the church is growing. In fact, you guys have actually grown through the whole coronavirus period.
Yeah, we just had a new membership class and added 30 new families to the church.
30 new families.
Yeah.
And you just started in-person meetings. That's crazy, man.
Well, we actually started in-person meetings right after the first shutdown.
Right.
And never looked back. Yeah, there was a lot of challenges and pressure to close back down, but we did not do that.
Yeah.
And so we just navigated right through COVID. We had 6 of my core leaders get it, a bunch of congregants get it. And then we just started passing out drugs to everybody and making sure that they made it through. Legal drugs, by the way. Hydroxychloroquine, budesonide, all those other things. I just went from an illegal drug dealer way back in the day to a legal drug dealer pastor today. So, and we have a lot of doctors at the church too. So.
I know you do. I know you've got, and that's the other thing that's fascinating. You have a culture so rich and so diverse, whether it's ethnicities or you've got one of the world champion painters of lowriders.
Mm-hmm.
You've got guys who are doctors who own medical centers. You've got, it is a mix. Of course, you've got petrochemical background, mm-hmm. oil business, all that kind of stuff.
And a lot of recovering drug addicts. We have a massive recovery community.
Well, the beauty of it is it's not just a recovery community. Sometimes we think, well, we're just kind of getting them cleaned up. You guys are actually, their lives are being restored. We see guys coming out there. I see guys, they say, yeah, I'm going to start a business, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Man, it's robust. And that to me is what we do is so well portrayed in what you do there. What Christian Men's Network is all about, building strong men who build strong families, who build strong churches.
Well, I appreciate that. And I would like to say that you've played a big part in it. And as much as you've been so encouraging to me on this call in Rock City, many years ago, I made the decision that we were going to partner with Christian Men's Network. Yeah. And that decision, when you come to Rock City and you hear men up front lifting their hands and shouting, and you hear the cry of men hooping and hollering and shouting in worship.
Yeah. I
owe so much of that to the fact that 3 years ago, well, it's been over 3 years. We've been connected for, I don't know, it's good 5 or 6 or more, yeah. but when we really implemented the building strong men and commissioning men, the 3-year curriculum that now we've seen 2 years go through. So 4 or 5 years ago, we built a strong culture of men, partly also because of you. And I want to say thank you to that. I appreciate you encouraging me, but a lot of it has been, I've had great leaders. I've had great men. I have 2 guys that one of my elders really took the reins for several years, and then we've handed it over to another man, and he got my former men's ministry leader got promoted to an elder. And it's really been because of guys like you that have fathered even me and invested into our church. So I just really want to say publicly thank you to you for that.
Yeah, amen. Well, thanks for taking some time. What I see there at Rock City is a model. I tell people about it because of your commitment to discipling men and doing it on a purposeful way. You have more volunteers. You bought a shopping center. You have people who are fully committed. You have a lot of single moms who bring their children because they feel it's a secure and safe place for them. You have a robust women's ministry. And I think that's because of that. And every place that I've seen strong leadership from the men, I see, I think of Brian and Bobby Houston, with their strong sisterhood and that sort of thing. But I see it coming out of men who know who they are. And so they're not threatened by anything. They're champions for it. So, David, thank you, man. Thanks for taking the time. And all of those who are with us right now, remember majoringinmen.com, majoringinmen.com. It's there in the comments. And cmn.men. Just get a hold of us. Anything you need. We've got coaches, people who, we do this kind of thing every month. We've got other tools, other Zoom resources, webinars, and so forth. Pastor David, thank you, man. We need to do this again. Every time you and I get on, I get fired up.
Well, that's what I like to do. The fire's contagious.
Amen.
So just hang around me. I'll take you higher. Higher into the fire.
Oh, man. Yeah. And then, so you can use a lot of those same old phrases. You just sanctifying, like keep on trucking, I'm
not going to hell in a hand bucket anymore. There's a whole bunch of them. I'm not a friend of the devil anymore. That's right.
Yeah, just sanctify the man. Hey, give Amber our love, and we love you guys. We love following Amber's Instagram because she shows us all the stuff happening with the farmhouse and everything.
If you want to know anything going on with my life, just follow my wife's Instagram, and you'll get the best pictures. It's called Blissful Ones for anybody that wants to know. Then you can keep up what's really going on with me.
It is fantastic. Hey, love you, David. God bless you, man.
I love you, man. We'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.